I am in the process of slowly working my way through Matthew chapter 24 from the Greek text. I'll be reading my Greek New Testament in Greek, giving my own translation in English, followed by a brief expositional comments. So we are at verse 15, and I believe what we're going to be looking at from 15 to 28 is the sign of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem around 70 AD that Jesus is predicting. So we begin at verse 15, reading the Greek verse by verse with a translation into English. Haten idete ta bedelugma tes eremosaos ta chrethin dia Daniel tu prophetu gestas in tapo hagio ha anagenoskon na eto. Whenever you should see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the one who reads understand. So Jesus is going back to Daniel 9:22, and also 11:21 and chapter 12, verse 11. It's also referred to in First Maccabees 1:54. Now, what he's referring to here is Antiochus Epiphanes, who entered into the holy place back from really 168 to 165 BC and defiled it. But he's becoming a type, I believe, of what happened when the Romans came in 70 AD. And Titus went into the temple, and the Romans destroyed the temple at that time. I think this is what Jesus is predicting. He's using Antiochus as a type of that. Tate hoi ente Judaiai, fugetosan eis ta are. That is, then let those in Judea flee unto the mountains. In other words, when you begin to see, I think he's saying that happened, and the Roman coming in and the Roman occupation, then you flee and go to the mountains and get away, because it's going to be a very, very bad time. And then he continues in verse 17. Ha epi tu domatas me katabato araita ektes oikias autu. The one who is upon the roof, let him not come down to take the things out of his house. In other words, the one on the roof, don't even go down to your house. Take off immediately, I believe he's saying. At this time, you have flat roofs, and you could go from possibly one roof to another and make an escape. So don't take the time to go back to your house or go down to your house, but you continue your flight on the roof and then descending down and going to the mountains. Then in verse 18, he continues, Kai ha into agro me epistrepsato apiso araita hematian autu. And the one who is in the field, let him not return behind to take his garment. In other words, if you're out working, don't go back to get your garment that you might have taken off, but flee immediately Jesus, I believe, is saying. Again, giving warning about what would happen in 70 AD. Uai de tais in gastri ecusais kai tais thelatsusais in canais tais hemeras. But woe to those who are having pregnancy, and to those who are giving suck, like feeding their young in those days. In other words, if you're pregnant, it's going to be hard to get away at that point. Or if you're feeding an infant, it would be difficult. And so I think Jesus is saying, woe to those that are doing that. In other words, there's the need of a quick escape in what would happen in 70 AD. And then he moves on, verse 20, Prasukeste dechena me genetai he psuke humon kemonas ude sabaton. That is, pray in order that your flight might not be in the winter or on the Sabbath, possibly during the rainy season where it would be hard to get away, or on the Sabbath, because in the Jewish world, they would only travel so far on the Sabbath. And so Jesus is saying, pray that your escape, your flight won't be on those, under those conditions. Then he moves on. Estai gar tate thelipsis magale hoya u geganen ap arkes kosmu chaos to noon ud ume genetai. For there shall then be great affliction, the like of which has not been from the foundation of the world until now, nor will it become again or be again. I think Jesus is speaking again of the awfulness of what would happen in that 70 AD invasion to the Jewish nation, to the Jewish people. And it will be a terrible time, I think he's saying. Affliction, like of which has not been experienced, I believe he's saying. And then he goes on and says, verse 22, Kai eme ekalabo thesan kai chemerai ekenai uk an esothe pasa sarx dia de tus ekletus kalabothe santai kai chemerai ekenai. That is, and except those days be shortened or cut off, no flesh would be saved. But on account of the elect, those days shall be cut off or shall be brought to an end. In other words, because of the elect, I'm going to not let this continue. Those days will be shortened, would be a good way to render that. And so I'm not going to let it continue. And therefore, make your escape while you can. And then he continues, addressing, I believe, the first question, when will these things be? Speaking of the destruction of Jerusalem, not one stone being left upon another. Then in verse 23, Tate antes humen epe edu, hode ha Christos, e hode me pistuse tep. That is, then, if anyone should say to you, behold, Christ is here, or he's here, do not believe. In other words, there'll be those that will be saying, and that was happening very early on after Jesus had taught this, that the Messiah is here, or the Messiah is here. And how many times in church history we have seen that happen? I remember years ago when I was pastoring, uh, there were those in our church that were saying, the Lord's going to come back. And I think it was 19, what was it? I'm trying to think of the date, but it was, you remember the date, Janet? It was basically very 19, I'm going to say probably 80 something or early 90s. September 28th, something like that. In the early 19 say 80 or 1980s or 90s. And what he's saying is, do not believe that, because no one knows when Christ is going to come. And then he goes on in verse 24, Agerthe santai gar suda Christoi, kai suda prophetai, kai dosu sin semean megala, kai terata hosta planesai e dunatan, kai tus eclectus. That is, for there shall arise false Christ and false prophets, and they shall give great signs and wonders, so that to deceive, if possible, also the very elect. In other words, there's going to be false prophets and false Christ, and they will do wonders and signs, Jesus is saying, to deceive, if it was possible, the very elect. And so he's giving warning about that. And by the way, that has gone on not only right after Jesus spoke these words. There were those that were claiming to be Christ, but they were false, or claiming false doctrine. So, and it goes on all the way through time up to where we're at today, and it's still happening today. And so Jesus then goes on, verse 25, Edu pra ereka humen. Behold, I have said to you before, an un eposen humen, edu inte eremo estin, me excelthete. Edu in tois tameois me pistusete. That is, if therefore they should say to you, behold, he is in the desert, do not go out. Or behold, he is in the closet, do not believe. In other words, don't believe when people will say, Messiah is here, he's in the desert. And how many times again people have followed false teachers claiming to be the Messiah, to be the Lord. And what he's warning here is don't follow that. Don't go out, is really what he's saying. And then we go on into the next passage, next verse. Notice it says, Hospergar he astrape exercetai apa anatalon kai finete os dosmon. Hutos estai he parousia tu quiu tu anthropu. That is, for as lightning comes out from the rising of the sun, the east, and appears in the west. In other words, as lightning comes suddenly and arises and appears, that's the way the Son of Man is going to come. So as lightning comes forth from the east and is seen unto the west, is what he's saying. Thus will the coming, the parousia is the word he uses here in the Greek. Thus will the parousia, or the arrival to of the Son of Man, to huiou, to anthropou. In other words, it'll be sudden. It'll be like lightning. And it's interesting that we need to understand that Jesus is saying it'll be visible. I don't think there's any secret rapture here. I think it's going to be a visible coming. I believe Jesus is teaching when that happens. And he at the first part of this teaching, he's talking about 70 AD. But now he's coming to answer the second question. The sign will be the gospel is preached to all the nations, and that's about it. The sign will be when you see it, but it will happen suddenly, like lightning. And then he concludes, Hapu an e ta patoma, where the carcass is. Eke sunakhthe santai hoi a etoi. That is, where the carcass is, there will, we could probably render this, there will the vultures be gathered together. In other words, it's sort of like it'll be very visible. You'll be able to see it. There will the eagles, we could probably render this where the carcass is, the eagles, or we could say the vultures. Seems to make more sense in the context here. There, the vultures will be gathered together. It'll be visible when it happens. And the sign of it all is going to be when it happens, really. And the only sign that precedes it is the gospel going unto all nations. So Jesus has answered two questions. And then he's going to go and develop the second question further in verses 29 to 31. That is, what the coming of the Son of Man will be like. And I think I'll stop there. I'm trying to hold these videos to about 16 or 17 minutes and not go too long. So I think we'll stop there. And basically what I've read here in my understanding is that he's talking about the 70 AD destruction of the temple, answering their question, when will these things be? And having done sort of a survey of what would happen through time, wars, famine, and so forth, he then answers that first question. It will happen shortly, and you need to flee and understand that it'll be similar to what happened with Antiochus Epiphanes. Then he's going to come next to answer the second question, and that is the actual coming. What will be the sign of your coming? The actual coming of the Son of Man. So we'll look at that next time, verses 29 to 31 and following. So I'm going to stop there and just continue. I hope someone might work through the Greek text and read it and, come along with me as I'm working through this. Thank you very much.